Hi guys, how are you? Welcome back to my garden. On a really nice and mild winter day, we actually already had the first snow. So there were a couple of days where I couldn't do a thing in the garden because at one point it was also just like the snow melting and it was just like wet and damp and well, so now it is nice and a little drier and perfect weather to actually go out here and do some winter jobs in the garden because I think it might be quite interesting to share with you what kind of things can you actually do in December in your garden, especially when you are in a climate zone comparable to where I am. I am at the south coast of the Baltic Sea. It is a microclimate here because I am in the Great Bay of Gdańsk. So this is a zone 7B and it is quite normal that at this time of the year it is actually still quite mild. So the first frost and snow came rather early and as a surprise, but it was beautiful. But what I want to do today is really focus on some of those jobs that I normally do around this time of the year and just share it with you. Maybe it's inspirational and a little reminder of things that you can still do in your own garden. One of the jobs that I still do around this time of the year is that I still collect the leaves, even though most of the big trees, they dropped their leaves already weeks ago, but there are some specimens, especially shrubs or smaller trees like the willow in my back, for example, still completely green and has all the foliage on even after the first frost. So that is one that definitely loses its leaves last in the garden. But here is a prunus, beautiful burgundy color leaves, and now with the autumn, they kind of get nice kind of like red crimson freckles on it. Really beautiful, but you can tell on the ground it's completely covered with leaves and I have lawn underneath here. Partly there's a lot of moss and weeds in here as well, but there's also some lawn in here. And if you have a nicer lawn to what I have, it is really important that you get in and collect those leaves because those leaves, they cover the ground. And then there's no light allowed to reach the lawn, and this is what grass in general likes. Most grasses, they are sun lovers, they need just that. And as the leaves start to break down here, it's also not good because then this entire process of leaves breaking down really prevents the lawn from thriving and going well through winter. So this is definitely one of the jobs that I need to do. By the way, if you wonder what Alfie's doing there, I'm not sure if you can see her, but Alfie still helps me in collecting the last walnuts. And well, I'm in the front garden, by the way, so that you might hear cars every now and then. But Alfie helps me collecting walnuts, but her way of collecting them is trying to crack them open and eat them because she really loves them. So yeah, this is one of the first jobs that I do here. Just make sure that you collect all of your leaves, and once I've collected all of them, they go straight onto my leaf compost heap because I have a compost heap that is only dedicated for leaves, and it takes roughly 2 years before they all break down and then I can use them. And I have an entire heap which looks fantastic with really lovely rich leaf compost. So next year I intend on sharing a little video with you what I do with especially that compost. But before that happens, I'm just gonna start collecting all of the leaves here in the front garden. That is much better. Now the lawn can finally breathe again and see some sunlight here, even though you can tell that there is no sunlight. It's kind of like typical weather for this time of the year. It's constantly grey and overcast, so whenever there is an afternoon of sun, there is a glorious moment. But yeah, it is good that the leaves are on the compost heap now, and you can tell that especially this area here in between this really beautiful ornamental plum as a standard and the hedge, the lawn is really not looking good. It's very patchy and mainly it's just moss and some weeds and the occasional grass in here. So I think this is an area that I'm gonna tackle at one point and change, because in general the front garden works rather well, but this is an area where I'm a little bit like, I'm not sure, something needs to happen here. But yeah, this is good, first project off the list, and I'm gonna take you with me to the midsection of the garden for the second project of today. For the next project, I want to tidy up a little bit in the borders, and by tidying up the borders, I don't mean by cutting back anything, because all of the ornamental grasses and my perennials, they are an amazing winter structure. And on top of it, what I saw is that some of those perennials, they obviously do produce seed. And the phlomis, for example, I saw that some birds were clinging on it and really taking some of the seeds out during winter time when it is frosty. So it's also really good for wildlife. So what I want to do is I just want to tidy up, meaning by taking some more leaves out and also just exposing, for example, some of the bearded irid rhizomes, because they are covered in their own leaves and in the leaves if I just gently swing around from the walnut tree here. So in my back, this is one of our 2 fully grown large walnut trees. And underneath, I have some really beautiful perennials. I've got some asters, some grasses, I've got bearded iris, and I've got some sedum. And especially sun lovers like sedum and bearded iris, they do not like to be covered by leaves or by anything which rots on top of them. So this is the next thing that I'm going to do. I just give you a closer look on what I do here, how I tidy it up to make sure that those plants will be happy for the next year. This is the area that I want to focus on with you now, and as you can see, there are a lot of leaves from the walnut tree here. There's still a few on the lawn, so I need to rake it over as well. But here, if I just go a little closer, there are some sedums, and towards the base of the sedum you can tell that everything is covered in leaves, and you just want to take these leaves out because if I just go in here gently, you can see the growth and the shoots for next year already. And it is maybe a good idea to make sure that they are not covered with leaves rotting on top of them. And the next thing is here are bearded iris, and it's really hard to tell where they are because it is completely covered. So what I need to do here is I need to come in and then really expose them. So get in here, remove all of these leaves that are covering the bearded iris. Try to find the rhizome again. There are obviously also these like strappy leaves from the bearded iris, so I would just like take them off as well to make sure that everything is exposed. And here is the rhizome, and this is supposed to be buried half in soil and half exposed, so this is what it does. And what I need to do is also maybe take out some of the perennial weeds here, because this is definitely going to survive winter and I don't want that. So make sure that I get in here and really remove everything that might rot and block these rhizomes to make sure that they are exposed to the sun and that they will be happy next year as well. This is something that I always do in winter time. The spent flower heads of the sedum are also an amazing winter structure, by the way, because you might see that they are disc-shaped and they are elevated from the ground. And when you have the first frost, it's really beautiful because the frost really creates this kind of spiky, wonderful textures on top of them because there is so much surface and texture in here. And then when I have the first snow here, well, I already had the first snow, so I could already see it. The snow kind of piles up like tiny mounds on top of these discs, and it is really beautiful, very whimsical, dreamy, just a wonderful thing. One more thing, if you have walnut trees such as I do, or any kind of nut trees or fruiting trees, make sure that nothing rots in here. So when you, for example, have an apple tree in your border, also what I have, make sure that you collect those apples because it's not so good when they rot just next to your perennials. And here I've got some walnuts and they're lying here already for probably a month or so, even longer. So they're not edible. And you can tell that they have even like a little mold coming on the surface on the outside. So I make sure that I collect all of those and off they go onto the compost heap. And if a squirrel, for example, wants to come and still decides that that is a good edible nut, so it is, and then it can just come in here and collect those. But yeah, what I will do now very gently, just find my way through this entire border and collect all of the leaves to make sure that this is a little tidier and mainly that the plants will be happy throughout winter time. Alfie helped me as well, by the way, with collecting walnuts, as you might see, but she does it in a different way because she wants me to throw the walnuts so she can play with that. This is what we're going to do in a moment, though. So, first of all, I just quickly want to show you how this situation looks. A lot better. I really like it. So, all my sun-loving plants, they are exposed to the sun now again. And if we just pay a little closer look to the sedums here, you can see that there are still tints of blush in here. Isn't it beautiful at this time of the year to still have a little bit of color in here? And this is also a reason why you shouldn't cut them back too early. Most important is that my bearded iris are looking really good. So the rhizomes are exposed to the sun. There's some nice fresh green shoots appearing. And if you look, there is a big tangle of rhizomes actually. So yeah, it is pretty much about time to go in here and start dividing them. But I think this is what I'm going to do next spring probably, because I think this might be a little too late now. But at least the leaves are gone, the walnuts are gone, most of the walnuts at least are gone, so that they can breathe again and they should be really happy. So off we go to the next project. One thing that I always do very late in the year is plant my tulips. And this is really a job that you don't need to rush, because as long as the ground is not frozen, you can always plant them all the way through December legit. There's just one thing that you need to make sure: your tulips should look like this. Because what you need to do is, when you order your tulips and they arrive, for example, already in October or November, store them somewhere cool, dark and dry, because if it's too damp, they might start to rot, because they come in a bag like this and you really don't want them to rot. And if you store them somewhere too warm, what might happen is that they start to sprout already, and when they have the first set of leaves, that is really not good, because then you put them in the ground, the frost comes, and then they might really just die back. So make sure that you just store them right before you plant them. The reason on why you can plant tulips so late is quite simple, because tulips, they do need to go through a period of frost in order to trigger whatever happens in here to make them bloom. Because if you are in a really warm climate and you just pop your tulip bulbs into the ground and they do not receive any frost and cold temperatures, they will produce leaves but most likely no blooms. So if you are in a very warm climate, what you can do is ask your local supplier if they do have tulips that have been prepared, so that the breeder already exposes them to cool temperatures, and then they are ready to go straight into the ground. I know that this is something that my parents did when they were living in Florida, because they had tulips every now and then. Not too many though, because if you buy those kind of tulips, they come a little pricey. So for planting, I use this little handy tool here, because you just push it down and then it has this little lever here which you can just use to just open it later on up again, and the soil will just go back into the planting hole. So all I do is I just push it in here firmly, and I love to plant my tulips here in between the Nepeta, because the Nepeta comes early. I have this really wonderful flash of green, like this minty sage kind of green, more it's a grayish green, and then I have this tulip here which is silver cloud. It is gonna flower in a nice kind of like silvery pinkish tone, and then I have these like really nice tulips just in between all of my Nepeta. So all I do now is take this thing out, and then the tulip goes always in pointy side up, because this is where the leaves and the flower will appear. So just make sure that you put it into the planting hole right, and then the soil, hope you can see it now, just use the lever, the soil goes back in, and good night, out, or out, not out, into the planting hole it goes, and it's ready. So what I can do now is I have 600 more bulbs, but I think I'm going to do that another day actually, because this is definitely going to take me at least a good 2 to 3 hours. So what we're going to do now is another project which also requires some time, and this is the last thing that I want to do with you today, and hopefully I still manage it before sunsets, because you know we are at the time of the year when the days are really short. So I quickly want to pack it and prepare for another area of the garden. One of the jobs that I always do around this time of the year, or at least I start, is cutting back my hardwoods. For example, this dwarf lilac that thrives next to the terrace here. And you can tell if I go a little closer, up until which point I always cut it back. I might need to come in with my finger maybe so you can really tell. So always cut it back till here. And then all these new side branches are appearing every single year. And you can tell that already I came in earlier on in the year and just gave it a nice light trim, just to bring it back into a sphere shape, because it really has a nice ornamental value. Next thing that I do is I start cutting back my roses. For example, here, Rose rugosa, they're very vigorous. I always cut them back at least by 2/3, because the growth is amazing. So if you just take a look, I cut them back up until here, and then this is the entire growth of the year. Isn't that just fantastic? But what I want to focus on is at the side of the house, still in the front garden, because next to the house there is a rubinia growing as a standard. It is kind of a fantastic size. Every single year it grows 2 meters or more, I think. I'm going to show you in a second. So this is exactly what I want to start with, and I hope I can still manage it before sunsets today. The robinia here, by the way, is I think one of the first trees that I planted here in the garden, because this is one of the first areas that we really created here when we came here, because there was nothing around the house. It was just lawn. It looked so sad and grim that I was like, okay, something needs to happen. So planted the standard robinia here, and because it is so close to the house, we always cut it back hard, kind of treating it like a pollard willow, and it works really well. So what happens is I come in and really strap it back all the way to kind of like a central core in here, and then next spring comes very vigorous. It's going to just come back with a lot of new fresh shoots, really beautiful. So you always have a nice lush ball or sphere shaped crown here, kind of like a big lollipop in a way, and it's so beautiful because you never have like dry out spots in the center. So this works really well with robinias. The way on how you cut back when you have a pollard willow or something like a pollard willow is you come in with your loppers and really cut back hard, and the best time to do so is in between end November and March, when the tree doesn't have leaves anymore. You might think like, oh, it still has leaves, but after the frost they're all crispy, crunchy, dried off, so they start to fall off. And if I cut it back now, I'm not going to have all these leaves in my border here. So actually it is a perfect day to really focus on this project. So all I need to do now is grab my big ladder and get cracking. Most of the jobs I've got done today, so even managed to cut back the roses, and there are some more bearded areas, so I also cleared those. So still the dwarf lilac is on my list, but this is one of the faster projects. One thing that I forgot to mention, and it's really important, and I can just show you now, whenever you cut any kind of hardwoods or shrubs, make sure that you do the cut on the angle as you can see it here, because if there's rain, the water drops, they can rinse off and they won't sit idle on top of your cutting, because what happens then is that the branch might start to rot or fungus might come into the wood. So always make sure that you cut on an angle. This is really good for your hardwoods. I just want to show you this. Aren't they beautiful? Even after frost, my chrysanthemums, they're still looking fantastic. Beautiful plants. Maybe I'm really going to put it somewhere south facing in a nice sheltered area in a border, because I think that they might be really happy and survive winter time here. But most important job, and I'm really happy that that went so fast actually, cutting back the robinia. I think in total that was maybe an hour at most. I don't think it was even an hour. So this is what I'm left with. It looks really nice. I really love it when this job is done, because another big job is still to come here, which is the willow, and that is not a fast job. That is not a 1 hour job. But what I did here is really cut back to exactly what I cut it back last year. Also make sure that none of the branches are like crisscrossing and rubbing on another, because that's also not good. That might also allow fungus or kind of disease to come into your hardwoods. And then I also checked, is there any dead wood inside? So I also removed any kind of like dead branches, but it looks really nice, really well. I know that next year it's going to come back very vigorous with a lot of fresh growth again. You guys, that is it for today's video. I'm really happy that I accomplished so much, even though, yes, I still have to plant all of my tulips. That is going to be a day-filling project for sure. But I'm not going to make a video out of this year, because last year I did 3 videos only dedicated to planting tulips in general, kind of like how to plant spring bulbs. So if you are intrigued to see those, if I remember, I give you the link down below here. Otherwise, just look for Baltic Gardening tulips on YouTube and you will definitely find those videos there. So all I can say now is thank you so much for watching today. today's video. Also, thank you for giving me thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. I hope that this was interesting for you. Maybe I had some good ideas on things that you might want to do in your garden during winter time as well. So all I can say now is take care, and I would really love to welcome you very soon in my garden, or maybe indoors in one of my Christmas videos that are about to happen very soon now. So have a wonderful day, guys. See you soon. Bye.